So if you saw the show last night, you saw that Lieutenant Governor of Texas, Dan Patrick, came on. He's turning 70 this week, and he had a very specific, and for some a challenging perspective, on what our priorities ought to be when it comes to coronavirus. Here's part of what he said.
Let's get back to work. Let's get back to living. Let's be smart about it. And those of us who are 70 plus, we'll take care of ourselves, but don't sacrifice the country. Don't do that. Don't ruin this great American dream. So
you're basically saying that this disease could take your life, but that's not the scariest thing to you. There's something that would be worse than dying.
Yeah, and look, I'm going to do everything I can to live, but, you know, if you said, are you willing to take a chance? You know, if I get sick, I'll go and try to get better, but if I don't, I don't, and I'm not trying to think in any kind of morbid way, Tucker, but I'm just saying that we've got a choice here. And we're going to be in a total collapse, recession, depression, collapse in our society. If this goes on another several months, there won't be any jobs to come back to for many people.
So that segment ran after a segment with someone who had another perspective. We didn't debate either one. We just thought you should hear both sides. We didn't even comment on it. A lot of people loved what Dan Patrick had to say. We got a huge response. A lot of people really, really hated it. So we thought we'd talk about it a little more with one of the wisest people we know. Fox senior political analyst Britt Hume joins us tonight. Britt, thanks so much for coming on. What did you make of that? What was your view of it?
Well, I think he's essentially saying something that's not terribly different from what the president and Governor Cuomo have been saying, which is that this, what we're living in now, this circumstance as we try to beat this virus, is not sustainable. That the utter collapse of the country's economy, which many think will happen if this goes on much longer, is an intolerable result. And that he is saying, for his own part, that he'd be willing to take a risk of getting the disease if that's what it took to allow the economy to move forward. And he said that because he's late in life, that he'd be perhaps more willing than he might have been at a younger age, which seems to me to be an entirely reasonable viewpoint. Now, I guess a lot of people think that, as your previous guest just suggested, that, any kind of risk with anybody's life is intolerable. And I think, we live with the risk of seasonal influenza every year, and thousands upon thousands die from it. But we do not, as has been pointed out, shut down the economy to combat it. Now, look, the mortality rate from this is higher enough that it makes it alarming. So it's obviously a much more a special kind of case. But there we are. We don't shut down the economy to save every single life that's threatened by a widespread disease. We just don't.
Why do you think saying that, what you're saying is factually true. There's no precedent for doing that. And we faced a lot of epidemics over the years. I'm not even taking a position on where we ought to go next. But just stating that out loud, why do you think that enrages so many people? Sincerely.
Well, I can't know that. I can't read the minds of people I don't know. But there's one thing I do suspect in all of this in terms of the reactions to it. We are living in a country in which people's reactions to nearly everything have something to do, when you drill down, with how they feel about Donald Trump. And to the extent that what the lieutenant governor said on your air last night is similar to, in overall message, to what Donald Trump has been saying, I think some of the reaction to it may flow from that.
It's such a shame, because this moment isn't about Donald Trump, it's about us. It's about the rest of the country. So, maybe we should focus on that,
Well, if you're, and think of it this way, Tucker, if you're covering this coronavirus as a story in Washington, probably the best single place to go for information is the Daily White House Briefing. Now, Trump says all kinds of stuff, and he brags about what a great job he and his team are doing, and some of the stuff he says doesn't really advance your knowledge of the virus and its state of affairs within this country. But the people he brings with him do. And if you sit there and listen to it, you learn a lot. You learn a lot about the disease. You learn a lot about how they're trying to combat it. You learn a lot about what numbers to watch. For example, I've been fixated for some days now on the death rate, because the death rate is something that you can compare with other countries. We're on about a par now with South Korea, which is thought to have done a great job in combating the virus. So far, we seem to be doing fairly well, and it does suggest that maybe these things that we're doing are helping. You don't get that kind of analysis, however, from the journalists who were covering those briefings by and large. Our own John Roberts does fine, but a lot of the rest of them are just looking for ways to pick at Trump, and it seems to me to be, childish, silly.
And certainly beside the point in the current moment, I would say. Brent Hume, great to see you so much. Thanks.
Thanks, Tucker.